Cornelius, Vanderbilt, and the Railroads of the Gilded Age. While the use of railroads led to the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of the few, the widespread discontent of the public over these abuses of power led to the first political reform of government intervention into state affairs. The railroads and politics. The political structure of the railroads provided the opportunity for the rich to exploit the poor. However, it did spark the beginning of government intervention in business and state affairs. Railroads became the center of the segregation movement when it was the subject of the Supreme Court case Plessy v. Ferguson. On June 7, 1892, Plessy, a man of mixed race, purchased a railway ticket and sat in a whites-only train car. After he was arrested for violating state law, Plessy's court case made its way to the Supreme Court. The court ruled that racially separated facilities, if equal, did not violate the U.S. Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. The ruling was used to justify the separation of the races in school and other public accommodations throughout the first half of the 20th century, particularly in the South. This separate but equal doctrine was a major setback for the civil rights movement and culminated in the continuation of discrimination for decades longer. Railroads were also the cause of the Farmers' Alliance, a partnership between farmers across the country whose goal was to fight for fair prices when using railways to transport their crops for market. They pushed for a set of policies known as the Akala Platform, which, among other regulations, advocated for government regulation over railroads. This movement served as the foundation for both the Populist Movement and the Interstate Commerce Act. The Populist Movement was inspired by both the Farmers' Alliance and by the Granger Movement, a series of protests and pushes for political reform by farmers. Using grassroots campaigns, this movement resulted in laws meant to protect farmers from unfair prices on railroads, including the Interstate Commerce Act. The ICC was the government's first attempt at regulating big businesses, specifically the railroads. The railroads and economics. The economy of the United States experienced vast economic growth during the Gilded Age. Although oil, steel, and coal were all major factors in America's growth, the railway system was the most successful innovation of the 19th century. The railroad provided cheap transportation across the country to supply major cities with raw materials for their industrial needs. Because of the readily available transportation throughout the country, more and more opportunities were created for entrepreneurs to invest. People also had access to cheaper and well-made goods that were not available before the railroads were built. The economy exponentially grew because of railroads. Since more people could get a chance to export their original goods to other places, and their life quality became better because of the transportation, the whole economy was boomed to unprecedented levels of wealth, and the productivity was rising in an extremely quick rate. The railroads and society. Through the railway system, American society was able to interact and communicate efficiently throughout the country. As railroads contributed to the growth of all the newly founded industries, there was a high percentage of population and influx of immigrants. These new Americans proved to be willing to work for low wages and provided a steady workforce for big monopolies. As these new immigrants arrived, American society became focused on gaining wealth and achieving the American dream due to the huge industrialist influences on the population. Society's major figures, like the robber barons, emphasized the use of laissez-faire politics, making political corruption more commonplace in society. Eventually, the working class organized labor unions. Labor unions changed society's expectations about the industry's treatment of their workers and was one of the factors leading to the creation of the Interstate Commerce Commission, also known as the ICC. The ICC was established in 1887, and its goal was to prevent abusive practices and support fair working conditions. Other societal influences included revolutionary ideas like social Darwinism. Social Darwinism was introduced to society as industrialists competed against each other in the survival of the fittest. The railroads and culture. The railroad also had a major impact on the overall culture of America. Primarily, railroads facilitated rapid urbanization and the birth of modern cities, as transportation of goods and resources allowed for vast populations. Newly found technology and culture was booming through the cities as newly arrived immigrants made their mark on America, bringing in new cultures as well as inspiring a wave of nativism and xenophobia. An important member of the railroad industry was Cornelius Vanderbilt. Cornelius Vanderbilt was a tough business leader and a bold financial operator of the Gilded Age. He created transportation systems that stimulated and supported America's tremendous industrial growth, specifically between New York City and Chicago, and became one of the richest men in America. Vanderbilt revolutionized the American industry by looking at the minor details of business decisions, keeping track of his money and investments, and utilizing new management techniques like economics of scale. Most importantly, Vanderbilt monopolized the railroad industry as he built the infrastructure imperative to America's late 19th century industrial revolution. Cornelius Vanderbilt utilized vertical integration. Vertical integration allowed firms to control the entire manufacturing process from the extraction of raw materials to sales and distribution. Vanderbilt was considered to be a robber baron and one of the era's most dominant business leaders. Robber barons was the term used to describe industrialists, bankers, and financiers who were known to profit by using unprincipled business practices during the Gilded Age. Robber barons were seen as unethical because they were men who paid for what legislation they wanted, bought judges when they were sued, and fixed prices. This term created a culture of elite businessmen who seemed to be only looking out for themselves. It was also believed that when the robber barons gave back to their communities, it was based not in support of the public or generosity, but rather it was based on trying to clear their own names. Although robber barons like Cornelius Vanderbilt may have committed dirty deeds, they provided the foundation for the industrial powerhouse which America would become during the Gilded Age. America would not have been able to prosper economically without the transportation and railroad methods supported by businessmen like Cornelius Vanderbilt. Although Vanderbilt is known for saying, "The public be damned," his vast investments into the American transportation and railroad system supplied jobs, helped the increase of industry and market, and helped the speed of continental communication. Through the implementation of railroads and robber barons, American politics, culture, economy, and society was transformed into the modern age. While railroads did tend to favor the rich and powerful, they did inspire positive changes in the form of government, regulations, economic growth, and bringing America into the modern age. Thank you. Wait, leave it, keep going.